and welcome back to the Simply Human podcast and YouTube channel. I'm Christina, Caro, clinical psychologist, and my partner, executive coach Karen Lynskey, is off this week. So in our last 4 episodes, we have been going over the cognitive processing diversity that Carl Jung, a contemporary of Freud, and for those of you who are not familiar with Carl Jung, he wrote about his model of psychological types. So the last 4 episodes have been focusing on the 4 judging or evaluating cognitive functions. And that would be the extroverted and introverted thinking process and the extroverted and introverted feeling process. So for this episode to be of value, I recommend that you watch or listen to those 4 episodes first. To be honest with you, otherwise this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. This episode is just a real quickie talking about how to apply the knowledge about these different cognitive processing styles and how to use them to make holistic decisions. Now, when we started with Carl Jung's 4 perceiving or data collection processing styles, we summed it up with a very brief episode on holistic data collection using the Z model. So today's episode is the second part where we're also using the Z model, but now we're taking that data we collected and we're going through this holistic process of the 4 different ways that we can organize that information and come to conclusions about it. And then how can we use that, even say if we're solo and we're making a decision, or maybe we are making it with our partner, so we only have 2 brains in the room, we're not covering all 4 bases. And then also, how do we apply this in a group? Now, before we dive into this episode, please help us out by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, hit the share and notification button so you know when new episodes are going to be coming out. And if you're on the podcast, there is a text us link that you can hit. If you have any questions, you can directly communicate us through the text us link. And if you are kind enough to leave a comment, we've learned that apparently if you leave a comment of 7 words or more, that is what YouTube views as meaningful engagement. And it tells them, or it tells the algorithm that, oh, this is a channel we should put in front of more people. I've mentioned before that my goal in doing this channel is to create a resource for people where they can start learning about themselves, learning about other people in their lives, and also addressing foundational skills that I often find myself teaching and helping clients with in my psychology practice. Because I know right now in this country, there is a shortage of mental health care providers. I myself have a wait list of 3 to 6 months. And so I wanted to create something that was available for free to people to be able to start doing some of the foundational work. And so in order to help us get this out to more people, please leave us a comment, share it with friends, and let's help make this resource available to the community. So now let's jump in here. I'm going to do a quick reminder about what the 4 judging functions are, just in case you forgot. And also if you're just going to skim through this and be like, oh, maybe I'll go back and listen to the other 4 episodes. So Jung identified that there were 2 styles of processing he called thinking and feeling, but each of those is directed or oriented either inward, and that's what he called introverted, or it was directed outward, and that's what he called extroverted. So we have thinking in the extroverted or outward orientation, and that was about making decisions based on objective criteria. So it is usually criteria that is external to the person. So we're talking about standards, rules, regulations, laws, operating procedures, anything that is objective, that anybody who looked at it would see the same criteria and be able to apply it in the same way. So that was extroverted thinking. The next type of thinking is the introverted thinking, or that inward logical process. And that was the analytical, if this then kind of an algorithm type of sorting process, and also logical analytical principles. The third type of decision style is the feeling function in the extroverted attitude, so that outward focused feeling. So we clarified that feeling doesn't refer to emotions, but what he meant is it tends to be criteria that is based on much more personal factors like socially and culturally held norms. And because it's extroverted, it's just as objective as the thinking in the extroverted attitude of those objective rules and regulations. With extroverted feelings, you kind of think about social norms and cultural norms as those external rules that we follow, but it is applied in the personal realm. So it's often very person-centered in the decision-making criteria. And finally, we have introverted feeling. An introverted feeling is that inward sort of gut sense, inner compass. It's more of a felt sense that we have in our body. It's based on strongly held personal morals and values. And it is very more self-oriented, or it's focused on what feels right to me as opposed to how does this affect other people, like the extroverted feeling. So now let's see how we would use this in the Z model. So I'm going to add this to the stage. So once again, if you are listening on the podcast, we have a picture of basically the letter Z. And then in each corner, we have a label for each of the thinking or feeling functions. So in one corner, in the top left corner, we have the extroverted thinking. The top right corner is the introverted thinking. Come down the diagonal of the Z to the bottom left corner, and you have extroverted feeling. And then go over to the bottom right corner, and you have introverted feeling. Now, this handout will be available. The link will be in the show notes. So you can go to my website and download it, especially if you want to use it in a team. Now, I've included on this handout just quickie little reminders about what each of these functions are doing and what they're focused on. But if you've ever taken the Myers-Briggs type instrument, which is the instrument that was developed to try to help people identify which of these functions that Jung identified are your preferences, are your dominant and auxiliary preferences. And if you've ever taken it in college or in a workplace, you would have ended up with that 4-letter code that would have introversion, extroversion, it would have sensing or intuiting, it would have thinking and feeling, and judging, perceiving. So it would be something like mine, INFJ, which indicates that I'm an intuitive that's oriented inward, and I make decisions with my feeling that's oriented outwards. So I've put down the Myers-Briggs types for each of the quadrants or each of the corners of this Z model. So basically, we would apply this in the same way that we did with the example of the Z model for data collection. And if you recall, if you listen to that episode, I gave the example of if you were going to buy an electric pickup truck. So when we're doing the data collection, we would use the Z model to make sure we gathered all the information that would be relevant. That includes the extroverted sensing here and now data, the introverted sensing past experience data, the extroverted intuitive, what are the possibilities we're going to do with this vehicle data, and the introverted intuitive, what are the future adaptations, what's going on in the infrastructure, sort of those big systems oriented pieces of data that we need to think about the big picture. But once we gather that data, remember, data collection, you're not really processing it, you're just collecting data. Now we want to make a decision using that data, and we use the Z model. So to keep going with the buying an electric truck analogy, we have an extroverted thinking. We're looking for that objective criteria. So that might be, I have in mind a certain range that an electric vehicle would need to meet. Like I live in a remote rural area, and there's not a lot of charging stations between myself and I'm usually traveling about 350 miles to get to an urban area. So it would be really important to me. I don't want to have to stop halfway through and then sit around waiting to charge a battery. So the range, that criteria would be really important to me. And I would want to know when I'm narrowing down which vehicle am I going to buy, does the vehicle actually meet that range? Check, no check. It might be consumer report ratings, okay? Objective criteria. You have some, granted, it's actually probably subjective, but I'm looking at the compilation of ratings that might be, it's a 5-star rating. So I will say, yeah, I'm only going to buy I know I do this on Amazon. Like I only click on the products that have 5 stars. I don't kind of bother with the 2-star and the 3-star products. That's objective criteria. So what are the ratings? I'm looking for that 5-star rating. And then you might have something like objective criteria on the ability of the vehicle to meet the use requirements. And maybe that's rated on a scale of 1 to 10. So that would be using just my logical boom, boom, boom. It tends to be pretty rapid because I'm applying external criteria to whatever the data is I collected. Then I go into introverted thinking, and that's the what if analysis. Okay, so for example, I might think, okay, but is it better to lease or is it better to own? Then I'm going to think through that and what are the pros and cons. Is it better to put a higher down payment or do I want to have higher monthly payments? I'm going to think through all the consequences of that. What add-ons do I want and how do I rank add-ons and how do I prioritize? Well, if I get the burly tires, then I'm going to have to get the little flary things. Decide, do I want the mud flaps and where am I going to be? Well, I'm going to be driving off-road and I'm probably going to need some sort of undercarriage protection. So I'm thinking all through the what ifs and making the decision on what package I'm going to buy with the vehicle or if I'm going to lease, if I'm, how much I'm going to pay. Then I want to make sure I'm using that extroverted feeling, the more personal oriented. Is this a family vehicle? Does it fit everyone in the vehicle that I want? Am I going to be having my dog in the vehicle? I have elderly parents, so why I wouldn't be buying a truck at this point in my life is because they would not be able to get into a truck. They don't have that kind of flexibility, but that's an extroverted feeling decision like, oh, how will this purchase affect other people? Oh, that's not going to work for them. I'm probably going to scrap the whole truck idea. So you could see it's objective. It's about other people. It's about people outside of me and the impact it's going to have. Is this going to reduce the carbon footprint and my impact on the planet? That's an extroverted feeling criteria on making this decision. And then finally, we go to the corner of the introverted feeling. And that is, do I like the way it drives? When I'm in it, do I like the feel of it? Am I comfortable? I'm on the shorter side, is my foot hit the pedal? Like, does this feel comfortable to me? Do I like the color? It's really more of a felt sense. Do I like it? Do I not like it? So as long as I'm thinking through a problem, even though my preference is extroverted feeling, see, I can go through this little model and making a decision by having these little prompts to remind me of all the things I need to be considering before I make a decision. Now, if you're in an organization, if you remember, the goal is to have people on your team cover all the bases. So if you don't have one or more of the corners covered, such as, say, in a partnership, maybe there's only 2 of you, see if somebody in the diagonal is present, and that person will have the best chance of stepping into the non-dominant position to help fill in the blanks. I'm going to pull up this slide just one more time. So, for example, if we realize that we look at our team and we don't have someone who is in that introverted feeling corner, so that looking at, hey, are we aligning with values? Like, is this going to feel okay to people? The place you would go isn't to look to see, well, who's covering the base from extroverted feeling, because that person's introverted feeling is actually in the trunk of their car. What you don't actually want to do is go across the diagonal, and you want to see if you have people who have that extroverted thinking in their first or second, because that's the person who can access introverted feeling the easiest. It'll be hard. It'll be hard. Anytime we go into the back seat of the car, it's hard, but it's still easier than trying to, grab something that's normally in the trunk of the car. And it's too complicated to explain why it works out this way, that it's the function that's in the diagonal. Need you to understand that if you are using this in a team and you have maybe 3 of the bases covered or 2 of the bases covered, have the person that is across the diagonal try to fill in using this chart so that they could fill in the blanks a little bit on what's missing in your team. So that's how we would use it in an organization. But as you can see, when we use this model, we really are making holistic decisions based not only on making sure we gather all the data that we need for making a decision, but we are analyzing it, organizing it, and coming to a conclusion in a way where we are really thinking through all the different decision criteria that would make like a decision that we can feel really confident about. So I'm going to invite you to go ahead, give this a try, apply it to start with a simple problem that you're wanting to come to a decision to in your life right now and see how it works for you. And if you have any comments about that experience, please go ahead and put it in the comment section or text us because we would love to hear about your experience using the tool. And I just want to thank everybody for joining me for this shorty and for this entire series on Carl Jung's psychological types and cognitive functioning diversity, because I do think that when we recognize and start understanding that we have this diversity in our species of being human beings, and it's there for a reason. It's so we can address the variety of challenges that we deal with as humans. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in for this shorty. Don't forget, subscribe, leave a review, share your comments, and help us get this channel out to everybody. And until next time, stay curious and kind. See you all later. Bye-bye.